It started with the shells. Not the living, humming cloud that would soon flood the air of Broodwood, but their fragile, discarded skins. They clung to the bark of old trees and the sides of houses, tiny ghosts of a life that began 17 years ago. For the people of Broodwood, this wasn't a wonder of nature. It was a clock, ticking down to a terrible, final chime. The town itself seemed to be holding its breath. Broodwood was a quiet, forgotten place, where the biggest news was usually about the high school football team. But every 17 years, history repeated itself in the most gruesome way. They called it the Cicada Code, a pattern of death as reliable as the insect's own life cycle. Sheriff Eleanor Vance remembered the last time. She was just a rookie deputy. She remembered the suffocating heat, the deafening drone of the cicadas, and the cold clinical horror of 3 murders. 3 victims, seemingly unconnected, each discovered with a single perfect cicada shell placed over their left eye. The method was identical, a powerful blow to the back of the head. The investigation, led by her late mentor, Sheriff Bill McCready, went nowhere. Now Bill was gone, and the badge was hers. It felt heavier than ever as she stood in the musty evidence room, the 3 old case files spread out before her like a cursed tarot reading. June 17, 1987. That was 3 days from now. She reviewed the victims from 1970. The first was Arthur Peabody, the quiet town librarian. The second, Sarah Jenkins, a beloved high school teacher. The third, Elias Crow, a reclusive farmer. No obvious connections, no clear motives, no known enemies. There was just the cicadas and the code. Just then, her phone rang, shattering the silence. It was her deputy Dale, his voice tight with tension. "Eleanor, you better get down to the old Henderson place. Some kids found some. They're spooked." Her heart sank. The Henderson place had been abandoned for decades. It was also where they had found Elias Crow's body back in '70. The air in the woods behind the decrepit house was thick and humming. The first scouts of the cicada brood were already testing their wings. The kids, 2 pale-faced teenagers, pointed a trembling finger toward a dilapidated storm cellar. One of its rotten doors hung crookedly on its hinges. And there, nailed to the center of the warped wood with a rusted railroad spike, was a single empty cicada shell. It wasn't a crime scene, not yet, but it was a message. The starting pistol had been fired. That night, Eleanor dove back into the files, desperate to find what Sheriff McCready might have missed. She scanned the crime scene photos and the witness statements, but it all led to dead ends. Frustrated, she turned to the logs of personal effects. Arthur Peabody, library books, a fountain pen, a silver pocket watch. Sarah Jenkins, a lesson plan, a locket, a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. Elias Crow, a pouch of chewing tobacco, a worn wallet, and a small hand-drawn map. Her eyes stopped on the map. The log described it as a simple, topographical sketch of Crow's property. But something about it felt wrong. She pulled out a larger map of the county and laid the photocopy from the file over it. The hand-drawn lines didn't match Crow's land at all. They pointed to a patch of state forest on the edge of town, a place known as Whisper Ridge. The next morning, with the cicadas' hum growing into a persistent electric thrum, Eleanor drove out to Whisper Ridge. The forest was dense, the air cooler. Following the strange old map, she found a path that was barely visible, long since overgrown. It led to a clearing, and in the center stood a single ancient oak tree. Its trunk was scarred with initials carved over decades. At the base of the tree, half buried under leaves, was a small metal lockbox. It was rusted shut. Back at the station, she pried it open with a crowbar. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a stack of old black and white photographs and a small, leather-bound journal. The photos showed a group of laughing teenagers, their faces frozen in a time before Eleanor was even born. The year was 1953. The journal belonged to a boy named Thomas Tripp Henderson. The entries told a story of a secret summer romance, of clandestine meetings at that old oak tree, and of a terrible secret. Tripp and his friends had stumbled upon a cache of stolen money, hidden by a bank robber who had passed through the area. But greed had fractured their group. An argument turned into a shove, and a boy named Samuel Keene, Tripp's best friend, fell from the cliffs at Whisper Ridge to his death. They'd panicked. They buried the money and made a pact of silence, swearing an oath on the 17-year cicada brood that was emerging that very summer. "We swore on the cicadas," Tripp had written in a shaky hand. "Their cycle is our sentence. Every time they return, we will remember what we did." Eleanor's blood ran cold. The date of Samuel's death was June 17, 1953. She scrambled for the 1970 victim files: Arthur Peabody, Sarah Jenkins, Elias Crow. She cross-referenced their names with the high school yearbook from 1953. And there they were. The smiling faces from the photographs. They were the friends who had buried Samuel Keene. The Cicada Code wasn't random. It was a reckoning. A 17-year atonement for a 17-year secret. But Tripp Henderson, the journal's author, was the fourth member. He hadn't been a victim in 1970. He was the killer. He was honoring their twisted pact, ensuring their silence by making it permanent, one brood at a time. She looked at the current date, June 16th. The full emergence was tomorrow, and there was one member of that group still alive, besides Tripp himself: Helen Marsh, the homecoming queen from the photos. She was now a reclusive widow living on an old farm on the outskirts of town. Eleanor grabbed her radio and her sidearm. "Dale, get to Helen Marsh's place now. I'm on my way. The killer is Tripp Henderson." She sped through the town, the first waves of cicadas thumping against her windshield like fat, living raindrops. When she arrived at Helen Marsh's farm, Dale's cruiser was parked haphazardly, its door hanging open. Eleanor drew her weapon, her heart hammering against her ribs. The front door of the farmhouse was ajar. She found Dale in the hallway, groaning, clutching a bleeding wound on his head. He came out of nowhere," he mumbled. "Old man. Strong." Eleanor moved cautiously through the silent house. She found Helen Marsh in her parlor, sitting perfectly still in a high-backed chair. She was unharmed, but her eyes were wide with a terror that stretched back decades. Standing behind her, one hand resting gently on her shoulder, was a man Eleanor saw every Sunday at the grocery store: Old Man Miller, the quiet, harmless man who ran the antique shop. The man who had given her a lemon drop when she was a little girl. "Hello, Sheriff," he said, his voice eerily calm. In his other hand, he held a heavy, stone-headed walking stick, its end dark and stained. "Thomas Henderson," Eleanor said, leveling her gun. "It's over." "Tripp," he corrected softly. "No one's called me Thomas in a long time." He looked down at Helen. "We made a promise, Helen. On the cicadas. They bear witness. They always have." "It was an accident, Tripp," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "You don't have to do this." "An accident we lied about," Tripp replied, his eyes distant. "An accident we buried. We buried him, and we buried the truth. The cicadas are the only thing that remember him, so every time they return, we must remember too. Arthur, Sarah, Elias, they were starting to forget, to talk. The pact had to be honored." "The pact ends now," Eleanor said. The cicadas outside reached a deafening crescendo, their collective song a physical force vibrating through the old house. In that overwhelming moment of sound, Tripp's eyes met Eleanor's. There was no madness in them, only a profound, weary grief. He didn't resist as she cuffed him and led him away. On June 17, 1987, the Broodwood brood emerged in full, a roaring, clicking blanket of life after a long sleep. But for the first time in 34 years, no one died. The code was finally broken. Sheriff Eleanor Vance stood on the steps of her office, watching the insects cling to every surface. She thought of Samuel Keene, a boy whose name was finally known, and of the terrible weight of a secret that could only be silenced for 17 years at a time. The cicadas sang their ancient, deafening song, but it was no longer a sound of impending doom. It was the sound of a truth, however painful, finally being heard. Thank you so much for watching this story unfold. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Cicada Code, please hit that like button and subscribe for more mysteries. We'll see you in the next one.